I entered the Doctor of Ministry program at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary a few years ago, and after taking a number of classes to sort of clarify what one might do for a project, for a final dissertation, I came up with an idea of doing something with food and film, mainly because here in southeastern Ohio, one of our major issues facing our community is food insecurity. And the church I serve, First Presbyterian Church in Athens, Ohio, has been involved over a number of years with the Athens County Food Pantry, Rural Action, Community Food Initiatives, as well as hosting a college lunch program for over 30 years now. The idea was to try to cultivate a spirituality of hospitality. For this project, I came up with the idea of using a 5-week film series based on a number of movies that featured food prominently in them, and then developing study questions and a guide to go along with that, following each movie for table discussions. The 5 movies were Ratatouille, Food Truck, we had Chocolat, The Big Night, which was an earlier movie done around the theme of Italian immigrants and their food they brought to the country. Through these films, we were able to experience a lot of different kinds of themes within each of the movies, welcoming the stranger, providing nourishing food, and what it means to sit at table and welcome each other. Just some of the themes that were prominent in these films. And then from that, over the next year or so, the congregation, through prioritizing ministry and mission, we were able to purchase a van for community food initiatives. They call it the Veggie van, and it provides fresh vegetables to outlying communities here around Athens, Ohio, that might not have access to those vegetables in their own right. We also developed priorities with a local shelter program called Good Works, in which we have Friday night life meals that we were able to provide, as well as a Thursday night and a Saturday meal at United Campus Ministries. So from that program, from that dissertation, the church really developed even a stronger tie to food insecurity here in southeastern Ohio. Biblically, the dissertation focused on an Old Testament story of Abraham welcoming the strangers. This is the famous story when Abraham and Sarah are visited by 2 strangers and Abraham provides them a meal. It's from this meal that Abraham finds out he's going to be a parent at age 100. Of course, his wife laughs. And from that story, the entire Israel nation is born. And we as Christians claim that covenant relationship with God as well from that main Old Testament story, which I propose that God is first and foremost a God of hospitality, welcoming us into God's own world, and through that one seminal event in the Old Testament, providing us with the covenant model that we have as Reformed Christians, that God welcomes all. In the New Testament, of course, the main story is the story of the Last Supper. And I would also add to that the story of the road to Emmaus, where Jesus, after being resurrected, is on the road, has a simple meal of fish with 2 disciples who then run and tell that were not our hearts on fire when Jesus was talking to us. Again, an act of hospitality, providing a meal to a stranger on the road. Prayer before a meal is rooted in the acknowledgement that the world we live in and all that's in it comes from God. And so that moment before a meal is a moment when we pause to reflect that God's creation has provided us with all this goodness. We have the stories in the Old Testament, the manna in the wilderness, or we have the the prophets reminding us that there is a feast that God has provided for us. In the New Testament, it carries through with the idea of bread and cup in the communion being products of creation. And so this prayer at the beginning of a meal is an acknowledgement that what we have received, we are grateful for, no matter what it is. A simple bowl of rice, or an extravagant 7-course meal, that all of that initially comes from God's grace. It is the God of hospitality who offers us God's own good creation in order that we might live. And that is really at the heart of a grace before every meal. The kitchen in a church is a sacred space. And if you don't know that, whoever's in charge of the kitchen will tell you that. When you visit a church's kitchen, this is where activity like fellowship, potlucks, other kinds of events happen. When I came to First Presbyterian Church in Athens, Ohio, I soon realized, number one, who was in charge of the kitchen, and who I needed to talk to if we were going to have a meal or dinners. One of the amazing things that happened while I was here early on in my ministry was that we had traditional church potlucks where people would bring covered dishes to share around a table. But then I was running into folks who said, you know, we don't have many vegan options when we come to church potlucks. It's the traditional, you know, heavy cheese-laden casseroles and other items. We had both breakfast and lunch opportunities and dinner opportunities, but not many of them had vegan options. Well, I was pleased to find out that after I'd been here a while and a few folks had introduced a number of members of our congregation to what was called the CHIP program, Complete Health Improvement Program, suddenly vegan options started showing up at our potlucks. And it was amazing, just in terms of how we went from almost no vegan options to, I would say now, at least half of the options we have at our meals are vegan. Again, welcoming those who have different food priorities or different food needs even. We've got folks who are gluten-free, who perhaps are diabetic. We have folks that are dairy-free, and we've incorporated this into all of our meals and fellowship activities. Athens, Ohio is a university town, and with the university town comes a variety of cultures, a variety of ethnic groups that are represented here, both who are members of faculty and then students that come from a wide variety of ethnic backgrounds. We have a number of students that come to us from lots of different countries from around the world. And it's been a joy to discover part of one's culture is what we eat, right? There was an old saying that said, well, know who you are by what you eat and who you eat with. And so I've been very fortunate to live in a community that's had, Mediterranean offerings, good Asian Indian food, also food from, African countries, South American countries. And I think it not only exposes you to different foods, but to the history and the culture behind those foods. We have a few members of our congregation who grew up in Thailand and were children of Thai missionaries to Thailand, and the food from Thailand again is not only food that may be different than we grew up with here in the States, but the culture and history behind that food goes along with serving it. And so I was introduced to things like mangosteens and other kinds of food that I had never experienced before. I think anything that broadens our horizons to remind us that we live in a very diverse world where there's different histories and cultures, and anything that allows us to truly welcome the other and to appreciate their own history and their culture.